Archer of Basra, bringing you a commentary video for Napoleon Total War. This is an online multiplayer battle 1 versus 1 on the Grassy Flatlands map. I'm in command of the French army, and you can see my build up here on the screen. This was a ranked battle, and at the time we fought this, both myself and my opponent had a 7-star skill rating. So this was a pretty intense battle where both of us played very aggressively. My opponent, HG Capitan Kidd, is in command of the Prussian forces, and his build is up on the screen. Anyway, this battle looks at various tactics you should consider when you're facing an opponent with superior numbers and superior firepower, which is what Capitan Kidd has. He has 6 line infantry units, but 3 foot guards compared to my 9 units of line, so I'm outclassed in that category. And he also has 5 Prussian fusiliers, which are elite skirmishers, compared to my 3 chasseurs, which are your average light infantry. So I'm also outnumbered and outgunned in the skirmishing game. When my opponent deployed his troops, he split up his cavalry units to both of his flanks. He had 2 units of lancers on his far left, and 2 units of lancers on his far right. If you take a close look at the minimap, you'll find that the red triangles, which are his lancers, are pretty far away from his infantry and relatively unsupported. Seeing this, I quickly moved 2 lancers to my far right and 2 lancers to my far left to face them. Meanwhile, I unlimbered my howitzers and began firing on his advancing forces. Capitan Kidd had no artillery pieces at all, so he decided to rush me to minimize the amount of howitzer fire he has to take before he can close to combat range. At this point, my opponent decided to charge his 2 lancer units on his left flank at my lancers that are facing them on the opposite side of the field. In the meantime, the first volleys of fire are being exchanged between our skirmishers. Notice how I managed to countercharge my own lancers in the last second. Remember, it is extremely important that you make sure your cavalry is never charged at while it is stationary. Stationary cavalry gets slaughtered, especially when charged at by lancers. Realizing that I was severely outgunned, I pushed back my skirmishers and line infantry units in an attempt to buy more time for my cavalry to finish off his cavalry. Fire and retreat is a very useful tactic that you can employ when you're outnumbered. By firing a volley and retreating, you can constantly put pressure on your opponent to push forward. This can really strain his micromanagement. And over here I've charged my 2 lancers on my left into his 2 lancers on his right. And take this as a rule of thumb. Prussian cavalry is absolutely no match for French cavalry. My lancers are much stronger than his, and this has given me the upper hand in these 2 lancer battles on our flanks. I managed to shatter all 4 of his lancer squadrons and didn't lose any of my own lancers. With all of his cavalry gone, I can now freely and constantly harass his battle line. Capitan Kidd is now determined to press the attack with his superior force. He continues to move his line infantry and skirmishers forward in an attempt to encircle my smaller army. In terms of firepower, I stand no chance, but I quickly realized that there was a big weakness in his battle line for me to exploit. Capitan Kidd's center consists of his 5 units of Prussian fusiliers. His line infantry units were on his flanks. A strong force of skirmishers can only hold the center if it is properly supported by cavalry in the rear. With no cavalry left, his skirmishers are extremely vulnerable to rear charges by my own cavalry. And that is exactly what I'm gonna do.
Our men are running, sir!
With his center destroyed, he now has a massive gap in his battle line. With a gap in his battle line, I have effectively separated his right and left flanks. I can now plug in some of my own units of line infantry in this gap, and prevent his 2 flanks from supporting each other or regrouping. However, his line infantry units still outnumber and outclass my line infantry. Don't forget, he has 3 elite units of foot guards which are outstanding in firefights, and also provide inspiration for nearby friendly units. I have none of these units, and so in a sense, he still has the upper hand. Now if you take a look at the minimap, you can see that I have more men on my left flank than on my right flank. This is because I need to take advantage of the fact that my opponent's army is separated. If I divide my army into 2 equal halves and put an equal number of line infantry units to face his 2 groups of line infantry, then I'm wasting the tactical advantage that I have over him. So instead, I'm going to focus most of my firepower on my left flank. But this is not enough to win me the battle. I realized that my opponent had his general standing right behind his line infantry on my right flank, so I seized the opportunity to kill him.
We have killed their generals.
With no general, my opponent is now at a severe disadvantage, as his men will rout much faster. As I mentioned earlier, I wanted to focus most of my men on taking out the enemies on my left flank. However, Capitan Kidd still has a considerable amount of line infantry on my right flank, and if those guys manage to destroy my token force that I've left there to face them, I'm gonna be in big trouble. If he manages to break through my very weak right flank, he's gonna march right into the rear of my line infantry on my left flank and sandwich them. So what I need to do is constantly disrupt his men with cavalry. By harassing his line infantry with rear cavalry charges, I'm gonna keep forcing them into squares. If I can keep forcing them into squares, I'm really gonna minimize the amount of firepower they can lay down on my line infantry that are facing them. This should buy me enough time to finish off the men on my left. While I continue to harass his men with lancer charges in the rear, I'm gonna keep maneuvering my men so that they're always in a position to flank his line infantry. So this combination of charging lancers into the enemy lines, pulling them back, and then flanking their squares with your own line infantry ensures that your opponent has a micromanagement nightmare. If you can constantly keep him busy, sooner or later he's gonna make a mistake, and that's when you get the upper hand. And as you can see over here, he's so preoccupied with trying to fend off constant cavalry charges, he doesn't manage to put this unit of line infantry on his right flank into square, and this is gonna cause it to rout. And that's basically what I continue to do for the rest of the battle until all the units on my left flank rout. With his general dead, and no cavalry to fend off the constant disruption and harassment from my own cavalry, I am bound to win. So in summary, I started the battle by taking a look at my enemy's army. I realized he had 3 weaknesses. The first one was the fact that he had no artillery, whilst I had 2 howitzers. So basically he's forced to come to me, and this means my men can get the first shot on his men. Otherwise, I can just sit back and bombard his men with my howitzers. The second weakness he had was his cavalry force. He had 4 units of Prussian lancers compared to my 4 units of French lancers. In a one-on-one head-on charge between French lancers and Prussian lancers, the French will always prevail, if there are no supporting enemy units around, that is. He left his lancers unsupported on his wings, and this made them easy targets for my own lancers. I took the initiative and charged his cavalry because I wanted to take them out as early as possible, so that I could tackle his third weakness, and that was his center. Remember, the center of your army is possibly the most important part of your battle line, because it is the communication between the left and right. With no center, an army becomes separated and the units cannot support each other. Capitan Kidd's center consisted of a skirmisher force of 5 Prussian fusiliers. After taking out his cavalry on his flanks, I was easily able to smash into the rear of his fusiliers. Light cavalry is deadly against light infantry, and so I managed to destroy his center in a matter of seconds. I then proceeded to separate his 2 flanks and prevent them from regrouping by filling in the gap with 2 of my own light infantry units. I then hunted down and killed his general, whilst keeping constant pressure on his line infantry with effective rear cavalry charges. This was enough for me to overcome his superior numbers and superior firepower. My weaker right flank lasted long enough for me to finish off the enemies on my left flank. And over here you can see the men on my left finally regrouping with my right and surrounding his last unit of foot guards. So good game to my opponent HG Capitan Kidd. I thought he was a great player and I respect him for playing very aggressively. Hope you guys enjoyed this video, and please don't forget to comment, rate, and subscribe.